Charles, you know what I don't understand in Star Citizen?
I know that you don't understand a lot of things.
Okay, but specifically, like right now, the thing that I'm thinking of is
No,
armor.
you know that one tracks. Do you want me to explain it? Do you really want to go down that route?
I think I'm ready.
All right, this is gonna be a long one, so let me know if you lose me. All right.
I'll buckle in.
Okay. So the armor and deflection, and I'm gonna split those into two different things because they interact with each other, but they mean two different things. Is that it's gonna represent how Maelstrom is supposed to protect our ships and represent the armor of the ship way down the line. This is our placeholder until then. So some things are wonky and a lot of things are subject to change. But the important thing is all armor essentially has two main stats. It has an armor HP, which is the actual health of the armor, which is separate from your whole health. And it also has a deflection stat, which is split into two different subcomponents. We'll come to deflection a little later, but first, to address armor health, this ties into a lot of the systems that we're going to talk about. But importantly, your armor needs to be depleted before your whole health can be depleted. So a ship like the Perseus that has something like 50,000 armor HP, that needs to be depleted to zero before the whole health can be zeroed out. So it's effectively in addition to your whole health. So it's a bigger health bar. And then deflection and penetration, which we'll talk about, both tie into the level of armor health that you're at. So I'll talk more about that. But first, to address what is deflection. Deflection is a lot newer than armor health. Armor health was introduced with engineering late last year. Deflection came just a patch or two ago. So deflection has two components: a physical number and an energy number. Depending on which one it is, that's what's going to get compared to by the weapon that's firing at you. If the weapon that's firing at you has an alpha, or overall damage per shot, that's lower than your deflection value, it does no damage to your ship. So as a rule of thumb, physical deflections tend to have higher numbers than energy deflections. So it's a little easier to do damage to armor with energy weapons. That making sense so far?
That makes sense.
On top of that, armor actually has a multiplier to damage, depending on the weapon type. So while it is easier for an energy weapon to do damage to your armor, it is also does more damage when it hits because it has a multiplier. It does something like 20% more, but that depends on the ship. Ballistic weapons do a little less. So energy weapons are just overall more effective at stripping armor. The converse is true for whole health. All weapons additionally have a couple of other stats. But the important note that I want to make here is that even if a ship has a higher deflection than the alpha of your guns, all is not completely lost. You can find some ways to still be able to do damage. One of those is you can actually hit the ship with missiles. Pretty much every missile in the game has a high enough damage to do damage to the armor past the deflection stat. So it still does get compared, but even a size 1 missile is going to do a little bit of damage to an Idris. You're not going to hurt it very much, but you can. And the important note here is that as armor health decreases by a percentage, it decreases the deflection value of the ship as well in a linear fashion. So I'm going to use a nice easy one here. The Reclaimer, the Perseus, and the Polaris all have a physical deflection of 495. I'm going to round that to 500 just to make the math a little easier for us. If you were to reduce the health of their armor to 50%, their physical deflection would only be counted as 250, meaning a lot smaller weapons are able to start hurting those ships. So you can use missiles to soften up a target to be able to make it so you can do damage with your weapons. Tied into that as well as actually shields. Shields have another multiplier that affects ballistic weapons. So when you hit a ship, first your shot travels through the shield, then it hits the armor, which makes sense. But when a ballistic round passes through a shield, it actually loses a percentage of its damage. Now, that's tied to the amount of pips that are actually assigned to the shield generator, and it does decrease as the shield takes damage. But at the maximum value, that's 25%. That can have some pretty important ramifications. As an example, on something like Deadbolt 3s, which can normally hurt up to like a Starlancer tank, which has a deflection of 347, it stops
Mhm.
being able to hurt that. It can't hurt a Carrack anymore. It can't hurt a 600i even. It goes all the way down to only being able to hurt a Valkyrie through shields. So it loses a lot of its punch. A Deadbolt 4, if it's shooting through shields, can normally hurt basically everything in the game except an Idris. But if it's going through shields, it's not hurting any military subcapital or capital ship in the game. So those are important things to keep in mind. They can significantly actually alter the math for why ballistic weapons might be able to do damage. There's a lot of smaller weapons, for instance, that when you're shooting them at even a heavy fighter, if you're going through full shields, you're actually doing no damage to their ship. So just something to keep in mind.
That makes sense.
And I want to point out that you will always get hit markers if you're hitting shields. So it can be a little complicated to understand if you're actually doing damage to the ship underneath in some of those edge cases. But if you're not doing any damage and their shields are down, you'll get no hit marker and no hit indication. So you'll have a clear indicator that you're actually doing no damage. It's also worth noting here that armor does not protect everything on a ship. Turrets, engines, and other external components on ships actually get no protection from armor. So if you do come up against something like a Perseus or a Hammerhead even, or even the Idris in your fighter, you can still seek to disable all of its weapons and its engines. And they can't do anything about that. Their armor isn't going to help them. You can just go after them that way.
Okay.
hmm So
That
that's kind
sounds
of
kind of cool.
yeah, and it's something that people could try more. I mean, one of the fastest ways an solo Idris player is going to run into troubles if you disable their engines, right? And a couple of fighters can do that in not too much time if they've got the right loadouts. And even an Idris is still subject to getting hurt, even by size 2 weapons, technically. Strife mass drivers, not very good for fighting a fighter, can punch up pretty much through everything in the game. And that's going to be where your loadout matters a lot. Now, I don't want to get too much into the numbers on each gun, because I do expect these to keep changing. In fact, they changed drastically with 4.8. But as a general rule of thumb, cannons are going to be able to punch up quite significantly. Size 3 and size 4 deadbolts and MX cannons can generally hurt most, if not everything, in the game. As you go under, it's a little more difficult. Repeaters are going to struggle a lot more. You might hurt things up to a Constellation or a Valkyrie if the gun is sufficiently large enough, like size 5. And repeaters, or in Gatling guns in general, are really going to struggle to hurt anything that's not a fighter. So that's something you'll want to keep in mind, is Gatlings are not in a great place for hurting anything other than the fighter unless you've already reduced their armor.
Yeah, which is a super bummer for me because I absolutely love ballistic Gatlings.
Yeah, they're a
They go
lot of
burr.
fun. It leaves some ships in a really weird place, actually, too. Like the Wolf bespoke Gatlings are pretty much just worse than the laser version right now because of these changes,
That's what I've heard.
which I really prefer personally, the Gatling Wolf. So hopefully we see those things change. And these things are going to get tuned a lot. I mean, if we look at the spread of deflection values right now, there's a really weird gap, and there's a lot of breakpoints essentially where a lot of ships are just sort of clustered together as they need to differentiate them. So, like, most heavy fighters are in a really similar space right now. Pretty much everything that's around the Connie in size is in a similar space. And then you get up to like the Ironclad and Caterpillar, and those are all really similar.
Right.
There are a couple of other weird, unique exceptions to deflection in terms of that split. Like I said, generally ships have a higher physical deflection than energy, but it's not a massive difference. There are some ships where that number difference is much larger. The Hammerhead and the Tiburon, for instance, have a 531 physical deflection. That's the second highest in the game. But then they have a 380 energy deflection, which is a lot lower and is actually a lot less than pretty much all of its peers. So they're a lot more susceptible to having their armor melted off. Armor also affects one other really important detail, which is penetration distance. So every weapon in the game has a number for how far that weapon will penetrate through a ship to deal damage to components. Essentially, how this is calculated is when you hit a ship, it draws a straight line along that distance, which is in meters, and it deals damage to everything along that path. Now, the further away from your starting entry point into the ship, the less damage it does, again, in a linear fashion. So if you're hitting something at your maximum range, you're doing maybe a percentage of your damage. If you're hitting something right at the beginning of that range, you're doing almost all your damage. Now, the
Makes sense.
penetration
Yeah.
distance of a ship is reduced, again, by the armor health as a percentage. So when a ship has high armor, you can't get as far into the ship to deal damage to components. Now, that matters a lot for bigger ships, because you're already traveling a pretty significant distance just to get to their components, and then you're having it reduced. Again, as a rule of thumb, cannons are going to have larger penetration distances, and ballistic weapons generally have larger penetration distances. However, As we recently tested, and I can confirm, the penetration distance is affected after damage is done to the armor. That means if you hit something small with your Perseus, you're getting your full penetration distance because you will zero out their armor and then they will check to see how far it will penetrate. That's an important thing to note because if it didn't work that way, every time you shot at something, you would never penetrate on that first bullet because it would be reduced by 100%. So you can go straight through something. Is on top of penetration distance, you actually also have a penetration cone. So if you look at the weapon statistics, you'll have a near and far radius, and this is essentially the size of your cone, and it's going to deal damage to everything in that cone. So big guns have big damage cones. As you'll see, you can knock out a Hermes in like 3 bullets that are penetrating and knock out every component in its engineering section with a Perseus. It's not going to be the same for everything, but it does make it a little easier to hit components. And again, that damage cone is going to be drawn along the penetration distance, which is affected by your armor health. All right, now I know that was a lot of information, so did I lose you anywhere in that?
No, I think I'm kind of tracking you. Obviously we did test a little bit of stuff, and you know, I will say I wasn't paying attention wholly while we were testing that stuff, but I think yeah, no, I think I'm kind of getting it. Um, my experience with it has been when engineering dropped and armor dropped, it kind of felt bad for some of the ships that I really enjoyed being in. Specifically, the Paladin kind of used to feel it used to get soft death really easily by like cutlasses, but now that they've added deflection and stuff like that, it feels like it's kind of bringing it back around.
Yeah, I personally think it's a super positive direction, and I think the first iteration of deflection wasn't nearly far enough. This new update to make ships have quite large numbers has done wonders, especially for PvE content, which can almost make it too easy, admittedly. I think right now, weapon balance is in a really bad place. So, as of 4.8, most of you are probably going to see that for PvP, everybody is running deadbolts because they're pretty much the best in the game and they let you hurt everything. And the weapon speed on them is pretty good. Hopefully, we see these things get differentiated more. But it's worth noting that if you are playing PvP and you're just trying to fight fighters, don't run deadbolts. You don't need them. Still run Panthers or Attritions, and you're going to have a pretty big advantage over a lot of the people that you hit because a lot of people are just running deadbolts right now. And if you're running Panthers, you will have an advantage. You'll have a much easier time hitting them, but it is going to make it feel like in PvP that deflection isn't mattering quite yet because most people are just going to be running those weapons that can still hurt everything. Do you have any other questions about how it works?
So like, as somebody that that is kind of a certified murder hobo, what weapons should I be looking to buy?
Yeah, so as I said, deadbolts are really good all around, and the MXA cannons. But I can safely say that 84Bs, the size 4 Gatling, are actually in an okay place for fighting fighters. It's the only Gatling I would recommend, but those are okay. And they're much better than Revenants, which are the one at the same size. Use 84Bs. If you're using anything that has Revenants, take them off, go get 84Bs. They're just strictly better. At size 3, I also do like Shredders a lot. They have enough alpha to hurt pretty much everything in their size class, even after that shield reduction. And it also means that after like a single missile hit, you're able to start hurting things like Connies pretty quickly as well. Attritions and Panthers are pretty similar. I tend to think that if you're running attritions, though, you should probably just be running Panthers. The sustained DPS is really similar, and the extra alpha from attritions really isn't helping you at any size. Just run the Panthers, have the extra rate of fire, you'll hit your target more. But really, that's kind of the world we're in right now. You're using Panthers, Rhinos, Galderines, Shredders, 84Bs, Deadbolts, or the MXA cannons, and that's about it. Omniskis, Light Strikes, every other ballistic cannon just aren't quite cutting it right now.
That's wild, but okay.
Yeah, I
Makes
know.
sense.
It's weapon balance is not in a great place.
Okay. I'm seeing the vision.
Also, of note, PDCs won't hurt anything that's not a light fighter, a starter, or a snub until they get hurt a little bit. Even things like the Banu Defender, the Golem Ox, even won't take any damage from PDCs. So for all you solo Polaris and Idris pilots out there, go hop on a turret, hit them a couple times, and they should start getting hurt. But that is everything I've got on armor and deflection.
I'm excited to see more about it.
Yeah, I'm hoping to see them develop it into a more diverse space. I think right now our numbers are really crunched together. I'm hoping we see that expand, hopefully soon, right? I fully expect these numbers to change and change a lot every patch.
I'm excited to see what they do to fix some of these guns that are just not worth taking.
Hopefully, weapon speed changes. Things are really homogenized right now.
Makes sense.
I'd like to see some cannons in a more interesting space, though, right? Like the broadsword series of cannons are supposed to be like auto cannons, kind of similar to 40k auto cannons, where they're more fast firing. And right now they're just bad. There's nothing advantageous about them. It'd be cool if they got a much faster fire rate and it still had the alpha to threaten like mid-sized ships. And right now they're just worse in every way than deadbolts.
Hey guys, hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to, you can subscribe. It helps us out, helps us make more stuff for you. We're not doing this for us, it's for you guys. So, you know, subscribe, like the video. You can even comment about how much you hate me.
Or anything else you might want to see us talk about.
No, just about how much you hate me.
He does get off on it.